A little girl screamed, "Daddy, that's my brother." The millionaire froze and collapsed in tears. The cold marble floor of the children's hospital echoed with the sound of expensive leather shoes as Marcus Wellington strode through the pediatric wing, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the colorful walls adorned with cartoon characters. At 42, he had built an empire worth hundreds of millions, but success had come at a price, one that had cost him his marriage, his relationship with his daughter Emma, and nearly his soul. Today he was here for what his lawyer had called a publicity opportunity, a charitable donation that would improve his company's image after a recent scandal. Marcus had always believed that money could solve any problem, fix any relationship, and buy any redemption. But as he walked these halls, something felt different. The laughter of children, the gentle voices of nurses, the quiet strength of parents holding vigil, it all seemed to pierce through the armor of indifference he had carefully constructed around his heart. If this story moves you, please take a moment to like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe to Trillionaire in Love for more inspiring stories that touch the heart. The hospital administrator, Dr. Sarah Chen, guided him through the tour with professional enthusiasm. "Mr. Wellington, your donation will fund an entire new wing for children with rare diseases. These kids often spend months here, away from their families, fighting battles that would break most adults." Her words were meant to highlight the impact of his contribution, but Marcus found himself barely listening. His mind was elsewhere, replaying the argument he'd had with Emma just that morning. "You think money fixes everything, don't you, Dad?" His 15-year-old daughter had screamed at him before storming out of his penthouse apartment. "You missed my recital, my graduation, and now you want to buy your way back into my life with a new car. I don't want your money, I want my father." The memory stung more than he cared to admit. After his divorce from Emma's mother 3 years ago, their relationship had deteriorated into scheduled visits and awkward dinners. He told himself he was working so hard to provide for her future. But the truth was simpler and more painful. He had forgotten how to be a father, too consumed with being a success. As they entered the oncology ward, Marcus noticed the change in atmosphere immediately. The energy was different here, quieter, more intense, filled with a kind of courage that money couldn't buy. Parents sat beside small beds, holding hands that seemed too fragile for this world. Nurses moved with a gentle efficiency that spoke of countless battles fought in these rooms. "This is Tommy," Dr. Chen said softly, stopping beside a bed where a boy of about 8 lay sleeping. "He's been with us for 6 months now. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. His family drove here from 3 states away because we're the only facility with the specialized treatment he needs." Marcus looked down at the child, pale, thin, but with an expression of peace that seemed impossible given the circumstances. Beside the bed sat a man in work clothes, his calloused hands holding a children's book. The man's eyes were red with exhaustion, but his voice was steady as he read aloud even though his son was sleeping. "That's his father, David," Dr. Chen whispered. "He's been here every single day. Lost his job because he wouldn't leave Tommy's side. But he says there's nothing more important than being here for his son." Something twisted in Marcus's chest as he watched this stranger demonstrate the kind of love he had somehow forgotten how to give. David looked up and nodded politely, then returned to his quiet vigil. The simplicity of it, the pure, uncomplicated devotion, made Marcus feel like a stranger to himself. They continued the tour, moving through rooms filled with children whose courage dwarfed anything Marcus had ever shown in a boardroom. There was Lisa, age 6, who had painted pictures for every nurse on the floor, despite being too weak to hold the brush for more than a few minutes at a time. There was Miguel, 12, who had organized a joke-telling contest to cheer up the other kids, even though his own treatment left him nauseated most days. But it was in the playroom that Marcus's carefully constructed world finally shattered. The room was filled with children in various stages of treatment, some bald from chemotherapy, others connected to portable IV units, all of them engaged in the simple act of being children. They played games, colored pictures, and laughed with the pure joy that seems to be every child's birthright. In the corner, a little girl of about 7 was playing with dolls, her head wrapped in a bright pink scarf. She had set up an elaborate tea party, complete with tiny plastic cups and saucers, and was chattering happily to her imaginary guests. Something about her reminded Marcus of Emma at that age. The same serious concentration, the same animated gestures as she told her stories. "That's Sophie," Dr. Chen said, following his gaze. "She's been here for 4 months. Brain tumor. Her prognosis is—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Challenging." But she never stopped smiling. "She's actually been asking the nurses about her brother for weeks now." "Her brother?" Marcus asked, still watching the little girl arrange her dolls with meticulous care. "She insists she has an older brother who will come find her soon. The thing is, according to her records, she's an only child. Her mother died when she was 3, and she's been in foster care ever since. We think it might be a coping mechanism, imagining someone who will come rescue her." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. There was something hauntingly familiar about Sophie, something that tugged at memories he had tried to bury. As he watched her play, fragments of the past began to surface. Memories of another little girl, another hospital, another life that felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. 20 years ago, Marcus had been a different man. He had been married to his college sweetheart, Rachel, and they had been trying to start a family. When Rachel finally became pregnant, they had been overjoyed. But complications during delivery had changed everything. Rachel had died, and the baby, a son they had planned to name Michael, had been born with severe complications that required immediate surgery. In his grief and shock, Marcus had made a decision that haunted him still. Overwhelmed by the loss of his wife, and terrified by the prospect of raising a severely ill child alone, he had signed papers placing the baby for adoption. He had told himself it was the best thing for everyone, that the child would have a better chance with a family equipped to handle his medical needs. But standing in this playroom, watching Sophie arrange her tea party, Marcus felt the weight of that decision crushing down on him. He had spent 20 years building his fortune, marrying again, having Emma, and trying to forget the son he had given away. He had convinced himself it was ancient history, a painful chapter that was best left closed. Now, staring at this little girl who insisted she had a brother somewhere, Marcus felt the walls of his denial crumbling. The resemblance was subtle but unmistakable. Something in the shape of her eyes, the way she tilted her head when she concentrated. It was like looking at Emma at that age, or at photographs of himself as a child. "Dr. Chen," he said, his voice carefully controlled, "do you know anything about Sophie's background? Her birth parents?" "Very little, I'm afraid. She was placed in foster care as a toddler after her mother's death. Her father's identity was never established. She's been through several placements over the years. Some families couldn't handle her medical needs. Others found her too withdrawn. She only opened up like this after she started talking about her brother." Marcus felt the room spinning around him. Could it be possible? Could this child be connected to the son he had given away 20 years ago? The timeline was wrong. Sophie was only 7, not 20. But families were complicated, and medical records from that chaotic time might not tell the whole story. He was about to ask more questions when Sophie looked up from her tea party and saw him standing there. For a moment, their eyes met across the room, and Marcus felt something electric pass between them, a recognition that defied logic or explanation. Sophie stood up slowly, her small hand clutching one of her dolls. She walked toward him with the deliberate steps of a child who had learned to be careful with her body, but her eyes never left his face. "Excuse me," she said, in a voice that was soft, but surprisingly clear. "Are you here to see someone?" Marcus knelt down to her level, his expensive suit forgotten. Up close, the resemblance was even stronger. Not just physical, but something in her expression, a familiar intensity that he recognized from looking in the mirror. "I'm just visiting," he managed to say. "I heard there are some very special children here." Sophie nodded solemnly. "We are special. The nurses tell us that all the time. But I'm extra special because my brother is going to come find me soon." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "Your brother?" "Uh-huh. I know he exists because I remember him. Not really remember, but..." She paused, searching for the right words with the seriousness of a child who had learned to think carefully about important things. "It's like when you have a dream and you can't remember all of it, but you know it was good. That's what my, brother feels like." Marcus felt tears building behind his eyes, tears he hadn't shed in years. "What makes you so sure you have a brother, sweetheart?" Because when I'm scared during treatments, sometimes I hear someone singing to me. A boy's voice. And the nurses say it's just in my head, but I know it's real. He's older than me and he's been looking for me, but he got lost somehow. She clutched her doll tighter. I think maybe he's sick too, and that's why he can't come yet. But he will. I know he will. Before Marcus could respond, another voice cut through the playroom chatter. Sophie, there you are, kiddo. Marcus turned to see a young man approaching, tall, thin, with the pallor of someone who spent too much time indoors, but with eyes that sparkled with warmth. He was pushing an IV pole and moved with the careful gait of someone managing chronic illness. Michael, you're supposed to be resting, Sophie scolded, but her face lit up with pure joy. Michael. The name hit Marcus like a lightning bolt. This couldn't be a coincidence. I got bored in my room, the young man said, ruffling Sophie's scarf with gentle affection. Besides, I promised I'd help you with your tea party, didn't I? Marcus stared at the interaction, his mind reeling. The young man looked to be about 20, exactly the right age, and there was something about his features, something in the way he moved. That felt achingly familiar. Michael, Dr. Chen said, approaching them, you know you need to conserve your energy for treatment tomorrow. I know, Dr. Chen, but Sophie needed me, and that's more important than resting right now. He looked down at the little girl with an expression of such pure love that it made Marcus's chest ache. Are you Sophie's brother? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer in his heart. Michael and Sophie exchanged a look that spoke of secrets shared and understood. Not exactly, Michael said carefully. I mean, not legally. But Sophie and I, we understand each other. We both know what it's like to be alone, to feel like something's missing. When I first met her a few months ago, she told me about her brother who was going to come find her. And I realized that maybe I was supposed to be here for a reason. He takes care of me, Sophie added proudly. When the treatments make me sick, he sits with me. When I'm scared, he tells me stories. And when I cry because I miss my real brother, he says maybe the person we're looking for is right in front of us sometimes. Marcus felt the world shift around him. 20 years of careful emotional control crumbled in an instant as he looked at these two children. Because that's what they were. Despite their illness and their wisdom, who had found in each other what he had denied them both. Michael, he said, his voice shaking, can I ask you about your background? Your adoption? The young man's expression became guarded. Why? Dr. Chen looked between them with growing concern. Mr. Wellington, perhaps we should... But before she could finish, Sophie tugged on Marcus's sleeve. Mister, she said urgently, what's your name? Marcus, he said automatically. Marcus Wellington. Sophie's eyes went wide. She turned to Michael with an expression of wonder and disbelief. Michael, she whispered, remember what I told you about my dreams? About hearing someone sing to me? Remember the song I hummed for you? The one I said I learned from my brother? Michael nodded slowly, his own eyes beginning to widen with understanding. Sophie began to hum, a soft, simple melody that Marcus recognized instantly. It was a lullaby Rachel had sung during her pregnancy, a song he had hummed to his son during those few precious hours in the NICU before signing the adoption papers. Oh my God, Michael whispered, staring at Marcus. Yours? Daddy, that's my brother, Sophie suddenly screamed, her small voice cutting through the playroom like a bell. That's my brother Michael, and you're our daddy. I told you he would come. I told you. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He staggered backward, his legs suddenly unable to support him, and collapsed to his knees on the playroom floor. 20 years of buried grief, guilt, and love crashed over him all at once. The children he had abandoned through fear and selfishness had found each other. Sophie, who wasn't his daughter but felt like she could be, and Michael, his son. The child he had given away because he couldn't bear the thought of facing his wife's death and his own inadequacy as a father. They had been here all along, sick and alone, creating their own family from the pieces of their broken lives, and somehow impossibly they had been waiting for him. I'm sorry, he sobbed, reaching toward them but afraid to touch, afraid they would disappear like a dream. I'm so sorry. I was scared and I was selfish, and I made the worst mistake of my life. I gave up the most precious thing in the world because I thought I wasn't strong enough to be what you needed. Michael approached slowly, his IV pole trailing behind him. Up close, Marcus could see Rachel in his features. The same gentle eyes, the same stubborn chin. But there was something else there too, something that was purely his own. "I used to dream about you," Michael said quietly. "Even as a kid, I had this feeling that someone was missing. My adoptive parents were good people, but they died in a car accident when I was 16. I've been in the system since then, and when I got sick—" He paused, struggling with the words. "When I got sick, I kept thinking there had to be someone else out there who would care if I lived or died." Sophie had moved to stand beside Michael, her small hand finding his. "I told him you would come," she said to Marcus with complete certainty. "I told him our family wasn't complete yet." "Our family?" Marcus asked through his tears. "I don't have anyone else," Sophie said simply. "And Michael doesn't have anyone else. And you look like you don't have anyone else either. So maybe we can be anyone else together." The innocent wisdom of it broke something open in Marcus's chest. Here were two children facing death with more courage than he had ever shown in life, offering him the family he had thrown away, forgiveness he didn't deserve. "I have a daughter," he said carefully. "Emma, she's 15 and she hates me because I've been a terrible father to her too. I don't know how to be what you need. I don't know how to be what anyone needs." "That's okay," Michael said, and Marcus heard Rachel's voice in his son's words. "We don't know how to be a family either. Maybe we can figure it out together." Over the following weeks, Marcus found himself spending more and more time at the hospital. He arranged for the best specialists to consult on both Michael's and Sophie's cases. He discovered that Sophie wasn't related to them by blood. She was simply a little girl who had found her way into their story by the mysterious workings of fate and need. But more importantly, he began to learn what it meant to be present for someone else's pain. He sat through treatments, held hands during procedures, and read stories in the quiet hours when sleep wouldn't come. He watched Michael face each day with a grace that humbled him, and witnessed Sophie's unshakable faith that love could conquer anything. The hardest part was telling Emma. Marcus had expected anger, resentment. Another door slammed in his face. Instead, his daughter surprised him. "So I have a brother I never knew about and he's sick?" she asked after Marcus had stumbled through the entire story. "Yes," Marcus said, bracing himself for her reaction. "And there's a little girl who thinks we're her family too?" "Yes." Emma was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "When can I meet them?" The day Emma first visited the hospital was the day Marcus began to understand what family really meant. He watched his daughter sit patiently while Michael taught her card tricks, saw her help Sophie with a puzzle, witnessed the easy way they fell into caring for each other. "Dad," Emma said to him that evening as they drove home, "I'm still mad at you for all the times you weren't there, but I'm proud of you for being here now. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning." Michael's treatment was successful. The cancer that had brought him to the hospital went into remission after months of grueling therapy. Sophie's journey was more complicated, requiring multiple surgeries and experimental treatments that Marcus made sure she received. But through it all, they faced everything together. Marcus learned to sleep in hospital chairs, to celebrate small victories, to hold hope even when the doctors' faces suggested it might be foolish. He learned that being a father wasn't about having all the answers. It was about showing up, staying present, and loving someone more than you loved your own comfort. The day Sophie was declared cancer-free, 6 months later, Marcus found himself in the hospital chapel at 3 a.m. He wasn't a particularly religious man, but he needed to be somewhere quiet, somewhere he could process the miracle he had been given. Emma found him there, sliding into the pew beside him. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. "Too grateful to sleep," he admitted. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the early morning light filter through the stained glass windows. "Dad," Emma said finally, "I want you to know something. I used to think you chose work over us because we weren't important enough. But watching you with Michael and Sophie these past months, I think maybe you were just scared of loving us too much." Scared of failing us, Marcus felt tears start again. They came easier now after months of watching his children be braver than he had ever imagined possible. "I was terrified," he admitted. "When your mother and I divorced, when Michael got sick all those years ago, when you started growing up, and I realized I didn't know how to be what you needed. I thought it was easier to hide behind work than to risk disappointing you." "Well," Emma said, taking his hand, You can't disappoint us any more than you already have. So the pressure's off. It was such a perfectly Emma thing to say, sharp enough to sting, loving enough to heal, that Marcus laughed despite his tears. 1 year later, the adoption papers were finalized, making Sophie legally part of their family. Michael, now 21 and in full remission, had chosen to take Marcus's last name as well. They moved into a new house, smaller than Marcus's, penthouse but filled with the kind of noise and chaos that only comes from a family that's still learning how to be together. Marcus had stepped back from his company, appointing a CEO who shared his vision, but didn't share his obsession with control. He was still wealthy, still successful, but success now meant something different. It meant being present for Sophie's first day of school after her recovery. It meant teaching Michael to drive. It meant having dinner with Emma every Sunday, and actually listening when she talked about her dreams. The challenges hadn't disappeared. They probably never would. Michael's health required constant monitoring. Sophie still had nightmares about her treatments. Emma was still learning to trust that her father wouldn't disappear back into his work. And Marcus was still learning how to be the man his family needed him to be. But they faced these challenges together, as a family built not from blood alone but from choice, commitment, and the radical decision to love each other through whatever came. On quiet evenings, when Sophie was doing homework at the kitchen table and Michael was helping Emma with college applications, Marcus sometimes thought about the man he used to be, the one who believed that love was a luxury he couldn't afford. That emotional connection was a weakness that would interfere with success. That man had been successful by every external measure, but he had been desperately, soul-crushingly alone. Now, surrounded by the beautiful chaos of his children's lives, Marcus understood that he had been measuring success all wrong. Real success wasn't about what you could accumulate, it was about what you could give away. It wasn't about building walls high enough to keep the world out. It was about tearing them down to let love in. The little girl who had screamed, "Daddy, that's my brother!" had been right about everything. Family isn't just the people you're born to. It's the people you choose to love, the ones you show up for. The ones who show up for you when showing up is the hardest thing in the world. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, they choose to love you back. This story reminds us that it's never too late to choose love over fear, family over success, and presence over perfection. If this message resonated with you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and let me know in the comments what family means to you. Don't forget to subscribe to Millionaire in Love for more stories that celebrate the power of love to heal, transform, and create miracles in the most unexpected places. Until next time, remember that the greatest riches in life can't be counted. They can only be shared.